unmarried or a widower. It is difficult to believe that Paul had always been unmarried because of his background and because of who he was. Paul was a member of the Sanhedrin. In Acts chapter 26 and verse 10, Paul says, which thing I also did in Jerusalem, and many of the saints did I shut up in prison, having received authority from the chief priest, and when they were put to death, I gave my voice against them. How could he give his voice against them? It was by his voice in the Sanhedrin, which means he was a member of the Sanhedrin. Says Paul was a member of the Sanhedrin. He must have been a married man because that was one of the conditions of membership. There was an instance uh, uh, upon Jewish young men to marry. There was an insistence, and Mishnah said this should be at the age of 18. In the uh, Yevamot, in the commentary on uh, Genesis 5 and verse 2, it states, a Jew who has no wife is not a man. I believe it is an inescapable conclusion that Paul at one time was a married man. He undoubtedly was a widower who had never remarried. In chapter 9, we read, have we no power to lead about a sister, a wife, as well as other apostles, as the brethren of the Lord and Cephas? 1 Corinthians chapter 9 and verse 5. I think Paul is saying, I could marry again if I wanted to. I would be permitted to do that, but I'm not going to for the reason that I would not ask a woman to follow me around in the type of ministry God has given me. It is my conviction that in the past Paul had loved some good woman who had reciprocated his love because he spoke so tenderly of the marriage relationship. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it. Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 25. I would like to give you a quotation from F.W. Farrer, who writes in his life and work of St. Paul. The other question which arises is, was Saul married? Had he the support of some loving heart during the fiery struggles of his youth? Amid the to and fro contentions of a spirit which resulted from an imperfect and unsatisfying creed? Was there in the troubled sea of his life one little island home where he could find refuge from ins- incessant thoughts? Little as we know of his domestic relations, little as we care to mingle mere private interest with the great spiritual truths which occupy his soul, it seems to me that we must answer this question in the affirmative. The position of many expositors is that Paul had been married and that his wife had died. Paul never made reference to her, but he spoke so tenderly of the marriage relationship, I believe he had been married. The second introductory matter is not a question but a statement. We need to understand the Corinth of that day. If we do not, we are going to fall into the trap of saying that Paul is commending the single state above the married state. That one must understand the local situation of Corinth to know what he is talking about. Notice the